now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Live Tropical Weather Bulletin for July the 2nd. The main feature, or, well, to be honest, I don't think we can say there's just one main feature, there's two. We have Tropical Storm Bonnie here that's about to make landfall probably within the next hour, certainly within 2 hours, on the coast of Nicaragua, not too far from the border with Costa Rica. And the other main feature is in the Western Pacific, Typhoon Chaba, looking better and better as it gets very close to its own landfall in China. Elsewhere, further east, we have Tropical Storm Aere, or Irie, which is just on the top right-hand side there of the screen, and that's a very interesting shaped tropical cyclone right now, one that's struggling to wrap itself around. You tend to see things like that in the Western Pacific at this time of year sometimes. So that's up there too. Here's some more imagery. You can see Bonnie there down towards the bottom of the screen, and the area of interest that's at 10% in just sort of over Barbados. Regrettably, I don't have any imagery on this screen to show you the other area of interest that has now formed along the coast of, I think it's still South Carolina or North Carolina, which has a 20% chance from the National Hurricane Center in its latest update. South Carolina, a center of circulation has been spotted, but the convection and the upper levels looks appalling. We'll take a look at that later. Eastern Pacific right now looks like this. The area of interest there that was looking good for a long time on satellite imagery is now starting to fall apart. Goodness me, caught air in the throat there. And the National Hurricane Center has dropped down to 30% chance. A proper wide shot of the Western Pacific yields this imagery, and you can see both of those storms there looking fairly impressive. Well, one of them. The other one I don't quite rate yet, Aere, although it is expected to intensify as it moves through Okinawa and then eventually move on to either the Korean Peninsula or the southern Japanese islands. We're not sure which ones it's going to end up at yet. There's a close-up on the rapid scan imagery. It's coming up to the Ryukyu Islands, not too far from its convective tops near the center. Okinawa now starting to feel the effects of the peripherals, and we'll certainly see a more cloudier start to today. And that's pretty much everything I have on these screens. So let me try and jump over to another screen and show the Atlantic properly as I try and get something working here. We'll fade down the music at this point and we'll introduce our team tonight. We have with us Samuel and Xavier. Hello to both of you. And Sam, you are showing us key messages.
Yes, we are. So, as I mentioned a couple days ago, it looks like, thankfully, the hurricane watches are no longer in effect. We do have tropical storm warnings for the eastern parts of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. This storm is expected to keep its act together through the eastern Pacific, dumping heavy rainfall in the process along much of Nicaragua and northern Costa Rica. This does include the threat for flash flooding and mudslides. We're also looking at tropical storm conditions on San Andres during the next few hours. This is going to be both the eastern. This is going to extend from the eastern coast to the western coast. And then we are looking at potential tropical storm impacts on southern Mexico as this meanders into the eastern Pacific. So here's our current cone right now. The NHC is expecting this storm to become a hurricane on around Monday afternoon as it meanders to the south of Mexico. And we are looking at this actually being a hurricane continuing on into Wednesday. Currently, it is not expected to not expected to make landfall as a hurricane, but we do see that cone going right up to the coast of Mexico there, southern Mexico. So you're looking at places, I believe, places like Guadalajara. I'm not sure if Guadalajara is on this side of Mexico,
It's a
but
little
it looks like
inland.
they could be seen. Yeah, but they could be seeing some tropical storm winds as well. And speaking of which, let's go to those wind speed probabilities right now. So you can see
The margin of error
you
is
have
certainly there, and those chances have risen for parts of Mexico looking at that.
yeah. So yeah, currently these are the tropical storm probabilities. Do have a up to a 20% chance of tropical storm force winds for southern Mexico, along with parts of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And then we have the hurricane wind speed probabilities.
Oh, it's quite low.
Currently they are very low. But once we get more of a certainty on the forecast, these may expand depending on the conditions that Bonnie is expected to go towards.
And to clear up any confusion for anyone, it will only carry its current name, Bonnie. No matter where it goes, it could end up going to Antarctica and it would still have the name Bonnie. But it won't. Xavier, you're with us also tonight. How are you?
I'm doing pretty all right.
Oh, you're showing us this.
Yes. Since you said you didn't have the 96 all imagery, I thought I'd just show what it looks like right now.
It's a big mess, but it's a non-zero possibility of forming mess.
Yep, the chances have actually somehow managed to gone up from 10:10 earlier from when it was first designated a whopping 6 hours ago. Then I got surely invested after that, and now it's up to 2020. The really good question is the matter of whether the LLC will stay offshore, because obviously it's going to be hugging the coastlines of South and North Carolina. And then after that, it's the matter of whether it can actually get any organized convection rather than the mess it is right now. So it's a matter of whether that's going to actually happen or not. We've seen quick spin-ups for the Carolinas before. I mean, we literally had Bertha in 2020. Now, obviously, it seems to be a common trend. We had Danny in last year for Georgia, so or was it South Carolina? Either one of those two is near the borders of the states. Regardless, it seems that we always get those once per year where there's random spin up last second and then there's a landfall of it. So it's already got 35-mile-an-hour wind. It was confirmed by ASCAT, so it really just needs to get the convection organized, and that's all it needs to do.
I've got some imagery here. You can see where the center was earlier as it was moving along the coast, just as it was getting dark, very close to Charleston. It was hard to tell where there. It looks to me as though it has a slight northward element that would bring it overland very close to Charleston around about now. We don't know because it's just gone dark, but I imagine that's what's happening. Interesting. I mean, we're looking really up close here, and it's nowhere near being designated as a tropical cyclone at this point, and I don't see how it can.
Yeah, Kadesh done really good around it. It's got literally 20 to 30 knots of shear surrounding it, so.
Yes. Just try and get a different look. Ooh, that is a water vapor shot. Although the colour scheme is atrocious and not the one that I use.
You can also see the remnants of 95L, which are now pretty much in the northern half of Louisiana at this point.
Yeah, back to your screen there, and we can see that still rotating quite nicely. it had a chance. Maybe if it was later in the season, it might have had a better chance of doing it.
Yep.
Now on the bottom left hand side in our inset, we've got live satellite imagery there of Typhoon Chaba, which is our top priority still at this point, despite Bonnie about to make landfall. And so's Chaba, by the way. It'll probably happen just a couple, or maybe 3 or 4 hours after Bonnie does. But it's much stronger, it's much larger, and it is affecting about 60 million people with potentially dangerous weather, compared to about 1.5 million in Central America. Not that they're less important or anything like that, but we do have a lot of areas to cover, and we do cover them all as much as possible equally, but it depends on the priority sometimes. And there is the cone from the JTWC on Xavier's screen. I think it's well, there's not much else to say really, just that it is still intensifying, and it's going to push for a little bit stronger by the time it makes landfall, hey?
Yep, Joint Typhoon Warning Center is calling for about an 80-mile-an-hour peak, which would be just slightly more than what it is right now, because the last I checked, it's 75. So once it does do that, it is expected to weaken quite considerably by the time we get into the 3rd, so that would be Sunday. But the rainfall threat is still going to be there. We've been hammering on that for the last few days. Hundreds of millimeters of rain thanks to the large size of the storm and the slow movement. When you have a large storm, slow movement, those two things combined together, you've got some serious flooding problems. So if anything's going to be the major threat, it's definitely going to be flooding. So anywhere between the Hainan Peninsula, right inland west of Hong Kong, you guys are going to be looking at some pretty significant rainfall over the next few days as Chaba and its remnants continue to push slowly inland.
Now, we just had a message about recon are in Bonnie right now, and I knew that they said that they'll be in there later today. I've not been able to examine it. Oh, you're on the ball there, Xavier.
Center, as most small storms do. There was also a microwave scan that was showing that it looks like it was trying to form a bit of a core as well, although the core is more than likely going to get disrupted by the time it makes landfall in Nicaragua. So we are seeing that organization, and it's definitely a bona fide tropical storm, as much as it took a very long time to do so.
Indeed. KJ Callahan, weather, says, thank you guys so much for what you do. You guys are amazing. Well, that's a lovely comment to see, and we hope that we can keep it up as much as we do. Well, we're doing 2 live streams a day at the moment, with more video updates besides, so your support is very useful and helpful for us, and what we receive always goes into making our service better, as has been done already. We've made big investments this year. Actually, we're expecting in about maybe 6 weeks time that we will have a new fully automated 24/7 automated stream that will keep you basically a tropical cyclone dashboard that will take you around the whole world in real time with all kinds of cool stuff. So that's going to be really exciting to complement all of the commentary streams that we already do. Now, Xavier, you've moved on to the next storm in question that's currently active.
Yep, this is Tropical Storm Irie. I love how everyone's trying to pronounce this correctly. It would be Irie. Think of Irene, but without the last part. Pretty much what we're going to be seeing is some impacts to the Okinawa Islands. After that, it is expected on Monday and Tuesday to start impacting South Korea and quite a bit of Japan. It looks like by that point it will be turning extratropical and will be weakening significantly. But we could be looking at some heavy rainfall across portions of Southern Korea, the Okinawa Islands, and pretty much much of Japan, really, considering the fact that it's going to be going through much of the island. Guaranteed it's not going to be that strong by the time it gets there, but gusty winds and the heavy rainfall are going to be the primary threats. Thankfully, we're not looking at serious of a situation compared to other storms that have hit the region. This is pretty much one of those standard summer tropical storms, and we're not really going to be seeing much strengthening. JTWC is going with 65 miles an hour, but if we've seen what Irie... Yeah, it is a bit more, but we also got to look at the fact that, I mean, it's definitely not going to be any way of rapidly strengthening because the wind shear around this is insanely high. It's why it's got that very asymmetrical appearance right now.
Ugh.
Because if you look at the satellite imagery, you can really tell it's not doing that great in terms of wind shear. You can literally see the exposed center of circulation on that southern side here, over here. Got some good rainfall rates though. Okinawa Islands is starting to get some of the outer bands of it. But in terms of impacts to South Korea and Japan, that's probably going to be late Sunday into Monday, where that starts. And then of course you got Chaba, the rainfall rates going on here. You've really got some good
Impressive.
rains. Hong Kong's already gotten into the outer bands, so pretty much the outer bands of this extend all the way into Zhejiang, even maybe Maizhou. But Yangjiang and Zhanjiang is pretty much getting to the eye wall of this thing now. So the strongest winds are probably starting to impact that region. Haiku just outside of the eye wall at the moment here.
We had a question that was not removed, but it was flagged, so I just want to go through it before it disappears, because it was a legitimate question. From Tropical Storm Altony Bronze says, would Tropical Storm Bonnie cause rip currents near Mexico, and what is the ocean temperature where Tropical Storm Bonnie is now? Well, regarding the ocean temperatures right now, not really important, but they're around 27, 26 degrees Celsius, I believe, underneath its upwelling core. I know Xavier's got another screen up showing 27 to 28.
27, 28. It's going to be a little bit of a divot in the Eastern Pacific. The temperatures do go back up to 28. Some areas of 29 near the immediate coast of southern Mexico, but it looks like as of right now, in terms of its current forecast, it is going to go into this little cold divot that has been the upwelling from Blossom Celia still there. So it looks like it's just following the same path many of the storms have already this season in the Eastern Pacific have taken. And because this is going to be passing relatively close to Mexico, because we are looking at a track that pretty much follows like this, that is definitely going to cause some recurrence pretty much from the entire southern coast of Mexico there.
Now, MacGruber MD says, thanks for all the things that we do, it's amazing, which is another lovely comment. And as much as we like those, if we can help with any questions whilst we're here, then we're going to do our best. Sergio says, is 96L going to form? Xavier, your personal thoughts? No?
It's got a lot of work to do if it gets there, because right now it's struggling with the fact that it's under 20 to 30 knots of wind shear, and the fact that the convection associated with it is a mess. Now, we don't know whether it's gone inland because it's now gone dark, and B, the LLC actually had a burst of convection that fired up just as that was happening too. So whether it pretty much wobbles off the coast and stays off of the Carolinas will determine whether it can do anything. But in order to form, A, it needs to battle the shear. B, it needs to stay out to sea, and C, it needs to survive the land interaction with it.
Well, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, it most likely won't form. There's only a 20% chance, so there's literally an 80% chance still that it doesn't.
Sam, you're showing us live radar there.
Yes, I am. A lot of us have been tracking 96L, which has been meandering just off of the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. So you can clearly see a lot of the convection that's offshore here. Some of it of which is affecting some of the affecting areas from Jacksonville all the way up to Charleston. I think Charleston looks like you're getting the brunt of the rain here. And so while it doesn't, regardless of whether this is expected to form, we can see some localized flooding issues, especially near the coast where a lot of the rain is meandering.
I just realized something. I think if it were to actually become a tropical storm, it would probably fare well given what the next name of the Atlantic is now.
Oh, God.
Yes, don't remind us.
Well, that's one way to get rid of that name. Okay, let's move on quickly from that. Let's go back to some latest images of Chaba, if we can get it right now. Let's try and get the... I don't think they've got a rapid scan on it yet, but I think they might be. I couldn't tell if they're about to or not. Let's get the latest imagery from the RAM floater that we'll be able to show on our screen and see how it's doing on there. There it is. So imagery that we might be more familiar with, especially in the context of... I prefer this imagery because it's the same format as what you see on HerSat, and I've actually been able to calibrate this imagery myself now from unenhanced infrared, so that's really helpful and helps to distinguish plenty of things. So the eye feature is definitely there. It's not particularly deep, but it is certainly trying its best. It's much more... there's no other way I can say this. It's much more visible on visible. Infrared, though, still looking decent with that massive convection blowing round the northern side towards the western side, and big band extending out to the southwest of Hainan. Rainfall totals we expect from this will be substantial, could be in excess of 20 inches in isolated spots, 500 millimeters. If I was to just grab the latest model run to see how much more we're expecting from this point forward, bearing in mind that some of the rain will have fallen by now, we are still expecting from this point forth, getting still on for 500 millimeters of rain. So some parts of central and western Guangdong province in China are going to get extraordinary amounts of rain. So the flooding concerns are going to be very big with this one, I would think, looking at that amount of rain. Also pointing out that a significant uptrend in rain expectations from Irie as well, suggesting that Okinawa could now expect maybe 250 millimeters of rain or more. And I'm just checking to see if southern Japan, they're expecting a lot of rain on the latest GFS, I think from the tail of the storm, that could also deliver that amount of rain too. That's that was the 12Z run I was looking at actually, but the 18Z, at least for China, is quite similar. For Okinawa, a little bit hit and miss because it's a rather small island compared to where the possibilities of where the rains might fall. And the GFS is trying its best to try and make a third system follow Irie as well afterwards. We'll show that on the model runs later on, but I don't know if any of you have any thoughts, immediate thoughts on that.
Let me take a quick glance at that real quick, since I have everything already squared away real quickly. If it's the one that's, yeah, that's in the main, near the Marine Islands, is it? Yeah, I wouldn't put too much money on that yet, because for the fact that it is after pretty much the reasonable side of things, and I haven't really seen much. Oh dear. Okay, yeah, I'm not believing that too much yet.
It forms from the southern tail of Irie.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of a bit doubtful on that one right now.
And especially considering the GFS tendency to reproduce. That can happen. Alright, we'll leave that one to the side. Any observations you'd like to make about Chaba's appearance right now as it gets closer to landfall?
This looks like it tried to have some kind of eye show, but it's been clouding over once again. You can definitely see with the whole glitches and satellites, since it's still loading on my end. We can definitely see the complete opposite appearances between Chaba and Irie in terms of its structure. You got Chaba, which is pretty much formidable and profiting off the fact that there's next to no shear in it, which means that the only thing stopping it right now is the land and the fact that it's only got about 12 hours or so until landfall. And then of course you have
I think it's
Irie, which
less
is
now.
battling. Yeah, less than that at this point. And then you've got Irie, which is battling a bunch of wind shear and really just going to be racing up and accelerating soon enough. So, really, two completely different storms. You got one storm that's moving pretty quickly. You got one storm that's moving extremely slow. One storm that's formidable. One storm that's looking heavily shared. It's a tale of two different West Pacific storms for sure right now.
Hmm.
Uh, Definitely, I mean, the size of Chaba definitely is making itself known. I mean, you've got the outer bands going right into Laos and Cambodia right now. So, I mean, the outflow of this thing is pretty insane.
Just trying to get a read on its very latest position. Looks like it's around 20.5 north, 111.5 degrees east. And that right now will put it, just trying to get some distances from land, if the machine cooperates. So, from its closest point of land, we're looking at around 105 kilometers off the coast of near the southern tip of the Lezu Peninsula, which is that area that sticks out and tries to reach Hainan Island. A town there, Ziyangzhen, 109 kilometers away. Larger areas, Zuwen on the southern part of that tip, 142 kilometers away. Haiku on Hainan Island, 148 kilometers. Zhangjiang, which is an area watching for a potential landfall, although it appears to be going further east than that, 149 kilometers away. Maoming, 142 kilometers away. That's what I would have down for a landfall zone right now. Yangjiang, 156 kilometers. Those of you watching from Hong Kong this morning, 346 kilometers from there. Guangzhou 339 and Nanning 417. So those are some estimates there for distances. And if it's still moving at something like 11 miles per hour, which it was earlier on, then about 17, 18 kilometers per hour would suggest landfall. Bearing in mind it won't make landfall at the closest point of land. If you draw a straight line ahead of it in according to its movement, then I would hazard a guess that we would get landfall in about 6 hours. It won't be during our stream, that's for sure. But what might happen during our stream tonight is a Bonnie landfall. Back to the Bonnie imagery right now. This is the rapid scan, and you can see how it's getting closer, although it doesn't appear to be there yet. Somewhat difficult to get a read on exactly where that center is, but it's getting fairly close. Comments and questions, please send them in and we'll be able to take them live on the air. A comment there about recon, a drop sond is in 996 millibars, Xavier.
Oh, it looks like we are seeing some strengthening still up to 2 landfall. If that's the case, that would support probably a wind speed of around 50 miles an hour if that's the case.
Yes, forecasted by the National Hurricane Center that was, and I think that's going to end up being right. Christian, you're also with us right now. Welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so whilst I've not paid recent attention, I was here a few hours ago, however, so I'm not exactly aware of what's different, what's changed, you know. Yeah, looks like Bonnie's getting fairly close. Chaba and Aere still hanging around. Yeah, although I can only pop on quick because, I'm supposed to be awake at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and it's now 1:30 in the morning, so I've got to make it a quick one. But yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I'm just checking some more parameters whilst our discussion continues. Just seeing if there's any radar sites ahead of Bonnie. But it doesn't look like there's anything functioning. Trying to figure that out. But in any case, right in front of you there is the shortwave, I think, or at least the unenhanced. Or perhaps that is one of the enhancements, actually. Infrared imagery. Some of the enhancements add the color scales, some of them just make the black and whites look a little bit more clearer. And I think it is one of those. Trying to get this radar working, doesn't it? Oh, yes it is. Ah, we do have radar in this area. So I'm going to try and see if we can bring that to you in the near future. But at the moment I cannot. Don't ask why, it's quite difficult practical process, but we'll hopefully have it for you soon because it's quite impressive to look at. In the meantime, we're continuing to look at this visible imagery. Well, not visible imagery, infrared imagery now. It was visible imagery earlier. And I'm just literally working on trying to get this radar. Nicaragua radar, just about to have something else here. Gosh, the website is a bit of a mess. A little bit. Anyway, Xavier, you're showing us visible views. Very pretty.
Yep, this is of course from Hemo Area 8, which is the satellite that's used for the Western Pacific, and you can see it's a little bit lagged image range because it's not really updating every 10 minutes like it should be. But you can see we got a little convective burst that's been pretty much wrapping itself around the center of Chaba over the last bit here. There's also been another burst of convection that's been going on with Irie. You can see that by the little popped up clouds area just near its center. But in the meantime, you can see Chaba's looking pretty healthy. You've got the healthy outflow associated with it. And you can see Chaba, our Arie's outflow, which is pretty extensive as well. We can also see the naked scroll, this low level circulation, still completely sheared, which means everything is pretty much to the north and east of it at the moment here. Chaba, of course, making landfall the next 12 hours or less here, the latter looking likely at this point. And then we will be doing with Irie after that, still causing its own trouble in the Okinawa Islands, Japan, and South Korea. So a lot of areas getting hit, whether it's the clouds of it or the outflow of it or the rain and actual direct impacts from it. So Western Pacific is in for quite a bit in the next 2 days as these two storms continue on their journeys.
Alright, here is some of that radar imagery as promised of Tropical Storm Bonnie. It's near the edge of this radar scope, which is out of I think that might be San Andres. One of the islands out there. And you can see Bonnie's circulation getting pretty close to land. Hard to tell just how close to land looking at that radar imagery. But certainly impressive to look at, and that band extending out on the northern side. A string out there delivering some yellows, oranges and reds. So a pretty basic look at that radar there, but it gives you a pretty decent picture of what's going on in the absence of any more visible imagery this evening. What we haven't shown you so far is the latest, well we did earlier a little bit, but let's take a look again then at the National Hurricane Center forecasts. And there you can see this was the update from Advisory 17, which is 5 p.m. That's Eastern Daylight Time. 45 miles per hour, moving west at 17. I think part of the cone is still over Costa Rica, so it could even still be a Costa Rica landfall yet, although it is unlikely. And then out over the Eastern Pacific, and that strengthening trend begins again. Here are some arrival times for those tropical storm force winds. Expected immediately on the east coast of Nicaragua. Expected in the early morning hours on the west coast. Places like El Salvador, along the coast there, if it deviates north a little bit, that'll be during the during the day on Saturday. Guatemala, it'll be Saturday evening / night. Chiapas, Mexico, that'll be early Sunday morning. Oaxaca, late on Sunday, and then up along the rest of the Mexican coast throughout the early part of next week. And then once again is the key messages, and I think we're quite familiar with those now. It is getting a little bit stronger with its intensity, but I would still say that rainfall is the biggest issue from this storm, and we're expecting that could still be of the order of around 16 inches in isolated amounts, and quite a lot of areas above 7 inches at the least. Please message us. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and it will light it up for us to be able to spot. Oh look, there is everyone, and the chat's on the right hand side of all of that, so I know you've got all of the stats there, but I really just have my eyes on the chat over there in the far right corner, which is conveniently cut off on that one because I had to move the screen. Back to the Western Pacific view, and this is a wide shot looking at everything that's going on right now. Elsewhere in the basin, not much, a few little areas of convection blowing up. But there were some questions. Can 96L form if it survives, and will it go to the New England area?
No. There is literally no chance at all that it was going to be going there, because if you look at the models in terms of what 96L is going to be doing, you can see all the ensembles practically have it going out to sea in the next 48 to 72 hours. Maybe Newfoundland, if it somehow manages to survive there as it turns extratropical, but other than that, no.
Okay. Another question was also, what can we say about the future of Irie, and what does that swing mean it is currently doing? Are we talking about its visual appearance swing? I think. I mean...
Yep. If it's a swing, I've pretty much something I've discussed quite a bit now. While it's convection left way, it's got a new convective burst, but all the convective action is going on to the north of its center, because
Hold
right
on a
now...
minute. Check that infrared right now. It's trying to arc around the western side and create an enormous eye. Oh my goodness.
That is a new one. That would be interesting if that actually did happen.
Oh, and hexagonal at that. It's got edges, proper edges.
Yeah, you got the edge right here, another edge right here, another here. Yeah, that's full-on hexagon right there.
Well, that is actually going to be a fascinating one to watch just for how it looks, irrespective of anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing what 30 knots of shear can do to storm sometimes.
It is indeed. Back to this view, which is another view of that infrared imagery, very similar to one to what we were looking at just then, but showing both of those storms once again. Like we say, we've said in previous streams, it is a bit difficult to keep on top of everything at the same time. We understand that, people join our streams to find out information on usually just one of the storms. It's quite difficult for us to do that all the time when people are always coming in wanting to know about Storm A, B, or C, because it's affecting all of these areas at the same time. So we try and have balanced coverage as much as possible. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and then we can sort of tailor our stream to who's watching, basically. We're also now joined by Luis, who is the only person on our background team who is in Nicaragua, or anywhere near, as a matter of fact. So, Luis, what can you tell us right now, if anything?
Basically, we have some rains over the northern part of the country. There is some winds in the departments of Jinotega and Chontales. From what I know, there is also impact on the city of Managua and Leon.
There's what in Managua?
There is some rain, some
Okay.
floods on Managua.
Yep. So already you're hearing about flooding being reported. That's not a huge surprise, although Managua a little bit further west, and it's still a lot of the stuff, the convection and the rainfall is still out east, so that perhaps could be a concern for urban flooding later on. We're also now joined by Josh as well. We have sort of like an open door for our regular contributors to just waltz into our live events. Hello, Josh. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. And if either of you have any further comments, then please let us know when you would like to. Just taking a look at what else we've got right now. Xavier, have you been following the recon, because other people have and are feeding us information?
This is the updated recon observations as of 6 minutes ago, and you can see how at one point they found 1001, but then they also found that 997, along with stronger flight level winds of 50 to 55 knots. So that would be supportive of 45 to 50 miles an hour right there. Pretty much keeping Bonnie on pace with the National Hurricane Center's forecasted landfall of 50 miles an hour. Shouldn't be much strengthening now, the fact that ain't much strengthening at this point. Given the fact it is getting closer to landfall and pretty much just about an hour or so away, given where it is right now. So we'll see what ends up happening. Of course, much of the strengthening is not going to be until the Eastern Pacific, but we are seeing that strengthening up to landfall trend that the National Hurricane Center expected for quite a while now.
Got a comment there saying, "Can we take a look on the models?" I tell you what, we're sort of going to get a little bit of a structure to our Tropical Weather Bulletin hours whenever we do these live ones. We'll do them at 10 to, and that's a rule we're going to make. We're going to always do them towards the end. So we're going to throw all the GFS greatness on in about 7 minutes time. More observations from recon there in those charts. Anything of note?
Of course, there was those flight level winds we mentioned. So, of course, the first spike here, that was when they first went in to the center. And then you had the second time where they found slightly stronger flight level winds. In terms of SFMRs, it's pretty much been around the same, around 45 knots there. So pretty much we are looking at a solid 50-mile-an-hour storm based off of recon here. And that's pretty much the useful information that people would understand out of this stuff. The people who usually care about the wind and pressure is pretty much about 50 miles an hour with the pressure of 996.
Now, Luis, I know we didn't mention exactly where your area is, and you don't have to, but are you in an area that is going to be significantly impacted by this storm?
I am near an area that could actually be impacted from the storm, because in the north region of the country, the most northern cities always suffer from landslides.
Yes, we know that.
Seems that areas near rivers, just like Rio Coco, is expected to also have some serious flood problems.
Looking back at the
From
satellite...
what I've heard, there is also some wind gusts of over 65 miles per hour near Rio San Juan.
Alright, so wind gusts don't have that much bearing on the storm's sustained winds, but you can get some really heavy gusts from storms. So 65-mile-an-hour gusts. Sometimes you can do a general rule of thumb to suggest that the storm itself from that number would be around 50 to 55 miles per hour sustained winds. But of course you do get some fat anomalies, like the classic example being Cyclone Olivia in 1996, which was a category 4, not 5, with 140 mile an hour winds, I think it was, and had a wind gust of, 250 miles an hour?
Yeah.
A crazy number like that. So
We are starting to get ATCF updates as we typically do around this time frame, although it is probably the one that people care about the least. That is the one because it is 96L that got the ATCF update.
oh, trust me, I don't think that's going to be cared about the least. We've got plenty
Oh,
of
yeah.
viewers in that area.
35 miles an hour now with a pressure of 1012.
35. So not far off those tropical storm force winds, but still some way for that one to go yet.
Yep.
Let's go back to a close-up, if we can, on the Western Pacific. What's this one? Oh yeah, that's that one again. Just showing that sequence there of Chaba. Let's see if we can just get this reloaded and see if there's any new frames to look at. So that's how it's been progressing. The eye has become less visible in more recent infrared frames. Still there, of course. I don't have any visible to show you, but Xavier had some earlier.
Yeah, let me get that real quick. Or figure out where I put it. Oh, maybe we have this one I've been using.
Get a zoom in on Chaba's eye.
Yeah, let me get a second. Let's see if I can get the radar off of here. Always end up having fun with this. There you go.
So there it is in true color or geocolor. Yep, been looking decent, that's for sure. And not a huge distance away from landfall at this point. Having said that though, I don't think we're going to see a Bonnie landfall during our stream. I think it's going to be the next hour.
Yeah, probably. Recon just did another center fix. I gotta figure out where I put it. There we go. It looks like it's still quite a bit of a ways.
At least in the next hour, maybe more.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be another hour and a half too. Probably in time for the next advisory by the National Hurricane Center.
Yep. That is in 2 hours. We did have another comment that I can't resist not reading out. That we should make tropical weather bulletins year-round in the off-season.
Yeah, we kind of did have a motion on that actually passed.
In short, we are anticipating that we will be doing tropical weather bulletins year-round.
Yep. The only difference probably would be the fact that given the fact that Southern Hemisphere doesn't tend to be as active as the Northern Hemisphere, what you'd probably be seeing more is the Tropical Weather Bulletin lights that we typically used to do on rare occasions. So the ones that basically sum up everything in about a minute or two rather than our full length.
I don't know. I think people like watching us for 8 minutes just to say that there's nothing happening.
I mean, if people like that, I guess that's something we should do. But
Yeah. And guess what? More honey jokes year round.
oh dear.
Oh, not the honey jokes. But maybe it's going to get forgotten about soon if we get Colin to be a bit of a joke storm. Eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go back to some more imagery. Let's see what else we can show just now.
Do you have some imagery of 94E right now?
We've got the East Pacific as a whole, and you can see 94E off there that was looking pretty decent earlier, as we mentioned at the top of the show, but now is looking worse. It's had its heyday and its biggest chance to form. 30% chance now on the National Hurricane Center, and on the downward spiral.
It is now starting to enter those cooler SSTs that are unfavorable for any future development, so chances are only going to be going down from here on out.
Yeah, and you can see there, Bonnie, it's getting ready to get going in the Eastern Pacific. I mean, it has happened on a few occasions before. In fact, possibly a majority where a crossover storm has ended up being stronger in the Eastern Pacific than it was in the Atlantic. This is probably going to be another case. The last one that I properly count would be Cesar Douglas in 1996. Yes, Otto made it to the other side as a tropical storm, but it was
Significantly underperformed in the Eastern Pacific.
weakening and died. Cesar Douglas, though, was the last one, the last proper one, that Bonnie will be a proper one. And Cesar Douglas in 1996 was I think it was only a tropical storm in the Atlantic, wasn't it?
Yep. 20. Wait, we're talking about 2016.
1996.
No, 2016
Oh.
was Otto.
Cesar Douglas.
Oh yeah. Cesar Douglas is 1996. It was a Cat 1 in the Atlantic,
Right.
and then it became a Cat 4 in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
crazy.
last dual named storm.
And then the opposite.
And Otto was the first to kick off the single name crossover storm.
Because Joan was
actually something about Bonnie. Its track is just like Irene Olivia from 1971.
Yep, another one that I was going to mention, and that one was a little bit strong on the East Pac side too.
It's actually something that also counts because the storm is expected to pass over the Cocibolca Lake, Lake Cocibolca, and that could and say I could keep the convection a little better.
Over the lake, yes. It could give it a bit of a extra boost. It is quite a sizable lake there. I wonder how warm those water temperatures are in that lake.
like Nicaragua.
Yeah,
Second.
I can't imagine they'll be as warm as the sea.
Of course.
I know what you're gonna say.
Of course.
He's been looking for it on the sea surface temperature charts, but it's not there.
They are actually quite warm, but not warm enough for intensification.
I figured that would be the case. Alright, we've actually gone over time before I said we'd look at models, and I've not even loaded them up yet, so I'll just have to try and get that running. Of course, everyone's going to have their fun moments when we take a look at the silly range later on, but we'll start with the proper range, thank you very much, from the GFS 18Z run, which Xavier already doesn't like anyway, because he thinks it's biased towards strength, which...
I never liked the 18Z GFS.
Well, there's our first frame of it, so let's pick out the details from the initialization for the Atlantic whilst it builds up the rest of the frames. So Bonnie there, it initializes it with 42 mile per hour winds, and interestingly, the stronger winds on the southern side.
And then pressure at 1002 millibars initialized.
Okay, and fast forward to the 0Z frame, because after all that is now, and it has it at still around 43 miles per hour, so maybe a little bit lower than what we're expecting, what we currently have. And then what happens? Well, those tropical storm force winds in the green areas move over the lake, but just to the south of it, really, literally across the border between Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and actually I think loses latitude as it enters the Eastern Pacific, so it actually will cross the border at some point according to that model run and leave the coast somewhere near I'm trying to get this thing to cooperate, somewhere near Liberia, and then starting to move that northerly route. GFS 18Z there, suggesting that it may even have a brief hurricane spell sooner rather than later. There it is there.
Yeah, go later, and then you'll see the fun that it decides to do.
Oh, you are not, are we?
If you think it was a Cat 1 on the GFS, you are off.
Yep, and then there it is as Category 1 again. This is about 5th of July now. And there it is on the 6th. And now it starts to strengthen and enlargen. And there it is. Check that out. Getting to Category 3 status by the looks of things there. Out over the Eastern Pacific. So Ethan will have a field day over that one. Whether that happens or not in an Eastern Pacific in as bad a way as the one we've got at the moment, I doubt.
The GFS weakened it by 20 millibars, and then there you go.
Oh, and in the long range, another storm forms behind it. So what exactly does that come from?
Looks like one of those things. It's basically what they try to do with 94 Ace, like a carbon copy of it, but obviously we know that it ended up being too aggressive, and then they realized it's never going to form. So I wouldn't bank anything on that actually happening.
Right, so based on that, we're sort of expecting minimal Category 1 from Bonnie then.
Pretty much.
Just take it down 2 categories. I'm still waiting for all of the frames to load so we can still keep watching what happens with that storm. Let's look at the Atlantic because I'm hoping that there's nothing happening there. And as you go through that period, I'm delighted to say that nothing happens there. So that's good.
Now.
So this is preliminary, but one of the possible reasons we could see this would possibly, I'm not sure if the Saharan air layer will be spreading across, but I don't think that's the case.
I'm not sure.
Because every year we tend to have a burst of Saharan air crossing the main development region, going up into the eastern half of the U.S. Not to say that happens every year, but it is a typical trend.
But just now we've had a cyclone tracking Oz, one of Xavier's best friends, saying really decent coverage on both systems, thanks. Thank you for that. And just continuing the models building in. We're nearly at the end of that 16-day period. That next storm in the Eastern Pacific dies. Atlantic still dead, I hope. Yes, so nothing expected there for 16 days after Bonnie, although it could be different. Oh dear, what have we got here? That's the last frame in the Western Pacific. How does that happen? Let's have a look.
I call it the classic 18Z GFS move because that's been the case for several days now.
Got these.
At the end.
Oh crikey, look at this. So the GFS initializes both Chaba and Irie as typhoons. Irie initializing there with 76 mile an hour winds, which I think might be wrong.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
And then weakening from here on in, although when it reaches Okinawa it is 72 miles per hour. Chaba makes landfall. Let's just try and get a timestamp on that. GFS thinks it will happen at around 8Z, which is 6-7 hours from now. So yeah, like we said earlier, Irie making landfall in Okinawa there. That will be at approximately 12Z, which is around 11 hours from now. So we could be looking at 3 separate storms making landfall within a 12-13 hour period, which is sort of something you'd expect in the middle of September 2018, if you ask me, when we had 7 storms threatening land at the same time. God. Yeah, what's left? Aere then, or Irie, moves on. And again, GFS sort of still non-committal as to whether it will strike Korea or Japan, but I think it's just about going more for Japan there, especially with the storminess being displaced to the east. And behind that, there you can see again that little system that tries to form near the Yama Islands. but doesn't. Right then. Well, the remnants of Irie actually continue alive there and hit Japan again as an extratropical storm around the 12th, so that's interesting. But let's look further out to sea and see what we've got forming here, because you saw little glimpses of it. Long range, we've got something that decides to form very close to Guam around the 11th of July and blow up. No, not that much. And then a storm that forms. What's the longitude there? I'm trying to figure that out. I think that's very close to Hode territory, but I don't think it is quite.
Excuse me?
And then becomes a significant typhoon. This is again very long range. Both of them stay out to sea anyway, so let's just check Indian Ocean quickly here. I know we've run over time, but we may as well. Nothing going on there in the long range. Elsewhere, Southern Indian Ocean GFS has been wanting something for a while to try and form. It is still trying, it still fails. Australia, don't think we need to look at that. South Pacific, we don't need to look at that. So that's everything covered from the model side of things there. Xavier, any further thoughts?
Westpac isn't happening past hour 192, and Atlantic is better staying dead after this, and Eastern Pacific, that disturbance behind Bonnie won't form.
All right, excellent. We also had another comment from Cyclone Tracking Oz saying that they love Xavier to bits. Yeah. Right then, we're just about finishing up here. Just want to make sure we've gone through everything. Was there any late recon news?
See here. No, not really much of anything. They're going back towards the center now.
Okay, we won't be able to catch that sadly. But to recap, as we finish up here then, Bonnie is about to make landfall on the coast of Nicaragua, and then looks like it's going to cross into Costa Rica, something that you don't see very often. A 45-mile-an-hour tropical storm likely to be upgraded to 50 miles per hour soon, so keep watching that one. It should become a hurricane in the Eastern Pacific. Meanwhile, we've also got Typhoon Chaba, which is going to make a landfall in about 7 hours or 6 hours in China, near Maoming probably, and is currently carrying winds of around 75 miles an hour. We're expecting maybe 80 miles per hour by the time it makes landfall, approximately 120 kilometers per hour sustained winds. Also, as you saw on the side of the screen there, we have Tropical Storm Irie, not Typhoon Irie, which is what the GFS might suggest, but just a tropical storm at this rate, and I don't even know what intensity we've got for that right now.
Let me see here, because ATCF has been slowly updating through things. The updated is... Oh, everything's updated. Okay, so let me just recap everything. Bonnie has been upgraded 50 miles an hour with a pressure of 997 millibars. 96L, 35 miles an hour with a pressure of 1012. 94E is still 30 miles an hour with a pressure 1009. Chaba is actually much further than I thought. 85 miles an hour with a pressure of 969 millibars. And Irie is at 50 miles an hour with a pressure of 994 millibars.
Wow, going for it. That's interesting. I also forgot I'm playing the outro music, and we're actually doing On This Day next, so I'll turn that off. So let's take a look at what happened on this day in the wonderful world of tropics. When I press a particular button that I'm looking... No, not that one. That's the start of our video again. We don't want that. This one. Yes, on this day, July the 2nd, just last year, was Hurricane Elsa. Yeah, we had a hurricane by this point last year in the Atlantic, would you believe? And it was making landfall on St. Vincent on July the 2nd. Category 1, that was the only thing that was active on that day, and everything's just broken down at my end. We almost made it through a stream without something breaking.